Good afternoon. I apologize. I wasn't here this morning. I had something else to do. We are delighted to see you here. And this topic is very interesting. It's impossible to share and proceed together. Thank you for being here. And I really hope you have a fruitful work this afternoon as well. We can begin. Recollection in silence, one moment. We focus here and now. To welcome the gift of Sister Elisabeth. I was asked to speak in the afternoon because my strong voice will keep you awake. I hope not only the voice. To prepare my address, I use two tools, the Gospel and this small document, which is so important and everyone should have it. Every superior should know it. It's so precious. First, I thought, oh my God, there are many things which are a bit heavy, hard, but the more I read it again, I believe that these are very strong, important focus points. It's not that I'm making promotion on the text. The more I read it and the more food for thoughts I see in it. This text reminds us that evangelical originality is passing through attitudes and concrete choices, the primacy of service, the constant journey towards the poor, and solidarity with the least of the brothers, promoting the dignity of the person in any situation the person is living and suffering, and subsidiarity as a reciprocal confidence, exercise, and cooperating with all. These elements touch our consecrated life. We have already talked about these types of attitude last year when we talked about authority. In today's meeting, we take up this topic once again, referring to the exercise of power this time. This exercise, as we saw this morning, calls for a great care from the human and spiritual point of view in order not to fall into the temptations which are all written in this booklet in a chapter entitled Open Challenges, Service of Authority, and Relation Models. To probe into this care-like attitude, listen to the words of Jesus to the 12 who are sort of angry because of the questions by the sons of Zebedee. not only because they ask Jesus, can we be on your right and on your left, but they have an argument. They fight to know who is the greatest among them. You know that the chief of nations and Gentiles whom they recognize as the rulers lord it over them and are tyrants. It is not so among you. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wishes to become first must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as ransom for many. Jesus speaks to the 12 after the third proclamation of his passion before his entry to Jerusalem. That is at the end of his public life, while he's journeying to carry out the last act of the exercise of power entrusted to him by the Father. The power is to give his life as ransom for many. I believe that we can all wonder and also be sort of crossed that in such a difficult moment, the only worry of the disciple is just to know who will be the greatest. This allows us to see the great distance between the desire to follow Christ, to participate in his mission and welcome the way Jesus has chosen in order to carry it out. This episode reminds us that the first companions of Jesus who have shared his public life and walked with him, we too have a lot to learn always. That is how to sit on our right chair and be in the right place whenever we have to exercise the power that we have received. The answer of Jesus to the 12 is clear. Exercising the power means to be servant, slave of all, and therefore giving one's life. You have to learn from him to exercise the power as a service. Being aware that the gospel do not give us set recipes, but they highlight the main choices of Jesus and his attitude, and these are the guidelines for us when we carry out our task of governing. So once again, consider the two activities which are the essential elements of the public life of Jesus. And in Synoptic Gospel, this is identified as the setting in which Jesus carries out his power. This power that since the beginning he gives to his disciple. The power to drive out demons, to cast out demons, the power to cure diseases. This power works in us, with us. Let's see how. Public life of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels is opened with the baptism, during which God considers Jesus as his beloved Son, and this is followed by the temptation in the desert. Temptation which implements the comparison, that is Jesus opposing himself to the tempter. This shows as how the Son of God has to carry out his power to be acknowledged as the Son of God. The tempter says, if you are the Son of God, you can do it. You can use your power to fulfill and satisfy all your wishes and enter in possession of all the goods in the world. You have to submit yourself to my power, says the tempter. The rejection of Jesus to the tempter in the desert, objection to carry out his power, using it for his own sake, for his own interest, for his own benefit. This is the rejection which Jesus will all his life carry out, lifelong. Rejecting the tempter, Jesus must resist to the wish of the crowd to proclaim if king. After the miracle of the loaves, of the feeding of the 5,000, he has to risk to the hope of the disciples to see him free and redeem Israel. That is to overthrow the occupying forces and restore the kingdom of Israel. This is the hope formulated by the disciple of Emmaus after his death. We hoped that this was a part of the disciple in the public life, so they were not able to accept the journey to the passion and death. And so they became an obstacle to his journey, as you can read in the episode after the profession of faith of Peter in Caesarea. Peter says, you are the Son of God in Caesarea. But when Jesus announced the passion, Peter refused to believe in it, and who tried to convince him that it is not so. But Jesus reacted strongly, saying to Peter, this is the work of the tempter. Go away, Satan. You are an obstacle because your feelings are not the feelings of God, but the feelings of man. Since the beginning, since the cross, the tempter is in the crowd, in the religious, and Jesus has to choose not to exercise the power for his own sake. The gospel says those passing by were saying, you can destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Save yourself. If you are the Son of God, step down from the cross. At the same time, the chief priests, the high priest, together with the scribes and the elderly, mocking, they said, he saved others, now he can save himself. Jesus, the Son of God, was continuously tempted to use the power for his own sake. He was tempted all the time. So we can imagine that we too can have similar temptations. The fact that the public life of Jesus begins and ends with temptations on the way he exercises the power as the Son of God sounds for us as an appeal to acknowledge, to recognize that in each exercise of power, temptation is always there, and the possibility of abusing the power is always there, which is the use of power for one's own sake and benefit. Today, people talk about it. We know that in the church too. And so also in religious life, abuse of power are there. This morning, Sister Tiziana and Sister Simona have already talked about it. This shows the importance of daring to look into the eyes of temptations, which are our temptations. They live in us, in order to reject them so as to carry out power, just like Jesus, as Jesus did, in order to cast out demons also from us, away from us. This little booklet, it took me some time to digest it. The first time I read it, I thought, oh my God, this is so negative. And I did not feel like reading it, the second part, which is more proposing. Then I read it again and I said, well, it's not only negative, it's stimulating. It's important for each of us. The open challenges, the second part of the orientations, can be interpreted as the temptations against which we have to resist in order not to fall into the trap of the abuse of power. And it can be fruitful if you reread these pages many times and daring to confront the temptations which dwell among us. And maybe in the past we might have fallen into the trap of falling into the temptation, considering the exercise of our power. And we have to do this not to feel guilty, as Sister Tiziana, not to get depressed or discouraged. That's another temptation, to be discouraged. But we have to do this to get ready to reject temptation with the help of the Lord and with the help of our brothers and sisters. Don't take for granted that, oh, this is not my task. No, you cannot be so sure that this is true. Remember the risks of power linked to our choice of life to follow Christ in a congregation, a life choice characterized by the three vows: obedience, poverty, and chastity. Number 20 of orientation, the dicastery, talking about some institute, mentions episodes and situations where freedom was manipulated, as well as the dignity of people, not only reducing people to a total dependency and addiction, mortifying dignity and human rights, but also misleading the people through the charism, through be submitted also in the sector of morality and sexual intimacy with a great scandal. Well, all this is unveiled, it comes to light. This is based on concrete experiences of the dicastery. No one who carry out a power at a provincial general level are safe from the temptation to manipulate people to obtain something desired, maybe in a very subtle way. As for the vow obedience, Usually in religious life, the vow of obedience means to say freely yes and to listen. No, yes, to listen together to the Spirit, together with the sisters, to discern how to carry out our desire to give life to following Christ, to discipleship. That is listening together. This means that those who carry out power, a type of power, have said yes, just like the other members of the congregation, to be obedient, obediently listen. The abuse of power is if because of negligence, because of fear of comparison, fear of losing one's authority, or because you're sure you're right, those who exercise the power just inform the decisions taken or just order them without taking time for having a dialogue with the other people, a deep dialogue, listening and talking and listening. Another type of temptation when there is only apparently a dialogue, because the goal is to show to my fellow neighbor that I am right and my proposal is the only way out. And this can take the form, it's not for the people in this room, but it's generally speaking. This can take the shape of spiritual manipulation, affective manipulation. If I am convinced to think that I have the will of the Lord for you, or when I think I am the only one, the only person on earth who can interpret the will of the Lord. Orientation warns us on the fact, strong orientation, those who carry out their ministry without the patience of listening and the welcome of understanding are in the condition of poor authoritativeness for one's brothers and sisters. The authority of the religious superior should be characterized because of the Spirit of Christ, who came not to be served but to serve. The first service that we can do is to listen to the desires, expressed and non-expressed desires of our sisters, of the needs of our sisters. The way of Jesus, the way Jesus serves is characterized by the total respect of the freedom of one's fellow neighbor. There's so many episodes in the gospel showing the freedom of choice to decide, to take one's responsibilities, that Jesus leaves to those he met. In religious life, we consider our sisters as kindergarten children, and we have to teach them everything and tell them everything what to do, instead of making them responsible, making them growth, so that they are then adults and can choose freely. I was really impressed when preparing this text. I was impressed by the topic of the freedom of one's fellow neighbor in exercising power. Think about the fact that we can think, I have so many quotes, but I will not quote everything, but think about the meeting with the Samaritan woman, with the adulterous women, the healing of the blind man, the meeting with the rich young man, who for me means this type of freedom. It's the gospel says Jesus loved him, but he lets him leave, respecting his freedom of choice, even if this choice makes him sad. We do have this freedom with regards to our sisters. In the light of these episodes, according to the orientations, it's interesting to refresh one's memory and see whether in our most recent decisions we have practiced this obedient listening, whether we have respected the freedom of people, if we have done so, and if people have respected our freedom by listening to us, because sometimes the manipulation attempt is reciprocal. Just food for thoughts. As for the vow of poverty, just like for the vow of obedience in religious life, the vow of poverty means to allow freely to put together the resources that we have. By doing so, putting together all the resources, it's not only about money, material goods, but also spiritual resources, cultural resources, intellectual, manual, relational resources. We know full well that all these resources together lead us to a sensitive exercise of power. And putting all these resources together is never completed. The risk of transforming this is always there, even though it is a sign of communion and sharing, but the risk is to transform it in dependency without respecting the dignity and the freedom of people. It is not taken for granted that in congregations and within the communities, the distribution of goods is in a balanced way, respecting justice and co-responsibility in conformity. This is written in this booklet. Orientations warn us that in some cases there is a regime betraying the values of fraternal life. Authority is called to promote the dignity of the person. You cannot accept a lifestyle where for the economic autonomy of some corresponds the dependency of others, endangering the sense of belonging. I don't know if you realized that in some communities, at a general level, at a provincial level, and at a local level, the treasurer has a strong power, that the birtherer has a power which is sometimes greater than the one of the superior. Do you know what I mean? And we do what the treasurer says, what the birtherer says. If this focus point leads us to the economic dimension, where a place where the risk of abuse of power is important, you have to keep in mind all resources that, if treasured jealously, yes, can be used to crush others, to exercise a ruling of others. For example, information. To keep information is a power. So, for example, I will make friends with the person who has information so others don't know. Once again, I urge you to verify if and how, in the exercise of our power, are we really at the service of putting together all the resources which flow around. As for the vow of celibacy, just like for the vow of obedience of poverty, celibacy means to agree freely, to consider the congregation, the family in which we are invited to build relationship. Sororal, anyway, sisterly relationship. In Italian, we say brotherly relationship, even for women, and like a sorority in English. These relations are with chastity, that is respecting the inalienable freedom of each person. The painful revelations that the church is facing show us a lot of abuse of power, questioning the vow of celibacy and the chastity of relations, and not only at a sexual level. As you can read in number 20 of the orientation booklet, in community life and in the mission, it is possible to abuse by manipulating freedom and dignity of people, leading then us to a total dependency, killing the dignity of people, human rights, and leading to a submission which goes beyond. And today we have to be very careful and check whether the way we exercise power, we do it in order to build fraternal relationship, respecting dignity and freedom of people. Sisters entering in our congregations must be free innerly, and the journey of formation should lead them to an inner freedom which is more and more profound. Not to carry out things just because of fear, to do things because of fear. Allow me to say the risk of abuse of power. Maybe we too have had experience or paid the price in our religious life. Maybe we did. Maybe we have also some sign, some scar of it. I'm not saying this to discourage you, but to help each of us to be at the right place, daring to confront the temptation inside us, reminding us that Jesus faced these temptations too, and he gave us the power to reject temptation. In his discipleship with Christ and like Christ, we have received the power to cast out demons. The disciples came back to Jesus and said, "We cast out demons," learning by trial and error to carry out our task as a service for the benefit of all, the common good, and for the benefit of each, that is the personal good. Watching over the personal good and the common good for the entire congregation. If we do this with the grace of the Lord, because we cannot do this alone, if we do this with the grace of the Lord, we will respond to the appeal by Pope Francis to all communities in the world to ask for a testimony of communion in fraternal life, which becomes attractive and bright. The question is today, our communities, are they really attracting for young people today? Are our communities bright? Are our communities transparent? All should be able to admire how you take care of one another, how you mutually encourage each other, and how you live together. Taking care of others, encourage oneself reciprocally, and walk together. These are words by Pope Francis. The second power is the power to heal the sick, to cure the sick. To the 12 in mission, he says, during your journey, proclaim the kingdom of God, which is near. Cure the sick, resuscitate the death, purify the lepers, cast out demons. You have received and you give. And when John Baptist was asked, who are you? Are you the one who has to come? He goes, go. Jesus says, go to John and tell him what you see. The blind see, the paralytic walk, the lepers are purified. So you can see that many times demons were cast out and the sick were healed. And a lot of blind people now can see. We have received the mission to carry out these tasks, not only from a physical point of view, that is to heal the sick, not from a physical point of view. We do not have the power to heal the people physically, but we can listen to the invitation to cure the diseases, for example, to heal the sick, the blind, the paralytic, the deaf, or the leper, to help them, to heal them, not physically. Some attitudes which may help us to live this dimension and this exercise of power of governance. Be close to one another, next to each other. In most of the gospel, Jesus is journeying and he let people come close to him. In some episodes, the apostles try to to remove the people and let them go distant. No, Jesus let the people come next to him. He let the lepers come close to him, and he touches the lepers, and he is let himself be touched by lepers, and so he becomes impure. If we want to heal and be healed, we have to allow people to come close to us unconditionally. No one can be deprived from care at the side of the road. And if you have to wonder if there are members in our congregation that we risk neglecting and leaving aside because they are paralyzed in their habits or in the reputation given to us by us to them, or because they're blind because of their prejudices, or because they're unable to express their opinion or are not able to listen, or they are sort of uncomfortable people. So try, on the contrary, to allow them to journey together instead of leaving them at the side of the road, at margins. Help each person to express their desire of healing. We might be surprised when Jesus asked the blind, "What do you want me to do for you?" Besides this, we have to try to listen to this invitation. Don't believe that you know better than other people what they long for. Let people express their suffering, their longing, what they need for healing. Take time, even waste time, I dare say, to talk to each other and to listen to each other, so that together we can find solutions to the diseases nowadays. In dialogue and in prayer, unveil what prevents us in the congregation to build the fraternal communion, the brotherly communion among us, so that we become bright and luring and attractive. Acknowledge and recognize the fears, the pluralities, the lack of confidence. If we are blind, we cannot see our small world. The prejudices make us blind. Jealousy makes us blind. Deafness make us not step into a deep, loving relationship among us, which is the sign of the recognition of the disciple of Christ. Jesus said, "From this you will be recognized as my disciple." From the love that you will have a genuine love relationship, which is fully expressed in the gesture of washing the feet. Another important element: do not create dependent people. Respect freedom is carried out also in the healing episodes. Jesus, once he has healed a person, let the person go freely without expecting anything. Just be discreet. And this calls for a great work in us, that is, give unconditionally. What we have received freely. And I want to conclude, otherwise Sister Tiziana will kill me. Third activity of Jesus of Nazareth, proclaiming the coming of the kingdom of God, that is, proclaim the good news. This activity, the power to cast out demons and to heal, is the basis of Jesus' life when he said, when entering in the synagogue, he takes the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. The Spirit has anointed me to proclaim the good news and the freedom for all. The entire life of Jesus can be summarized in this. This mission he has then entrusted to his disciple. Each power was given to me. Go and out of all nations, make everybody my disciples. I will be with you till the end of the day. But remember that this invitation, Jesus made this invitation first to women, then to boys, men. So first to girls, to women. When he was resurrected, he spoke to the women who has been his companions in the street, one who has never abandoned it, because the men went away when he was crucified. Women remained there at the foot of the cross. So Jesus manifests himself to women, and they are the first one to be sent in the mission to proclaim the good news. Fellowship, discipleship, each of us with baptism has received this mission. Be certain I will be you every day till the end of times. So even in moments of doubts, you and we can feel strong and think about the words of Jesus. Come to me, you all that are oppressed, and I will restore you. Take my yoke and learn from me that I am humble and meek. You will find restore, because my yoke is sweet and my burden is not heavy. We thank Sister Elisabetta. She has emphasized important and beautiful aspects. Again, 30 minutes for table conversation.